Austin, if you could please join us. Austin, sorry, please. Thank you. And request everyone to please be seated.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. This is perhaps a very apt topic to kick us off in the first panel, given everything going on in the world. Can politics meet opportunity when it comes to technology partnerships? And we have a fantastic panel of experts here to talk with us on this topic today. I think certainly if you had looked back 7-10 years ago, many technologists, certainly leading technologists in the United States, would have told you that what they were doing was beyond, maybe above geopolitics. That wasn't what technological innovation was about in the United States. That story has certainly changed. We have seen that consistently, I think, across 2 administrations now in the United States. So whether that started with the conversation about Huawei in the first Trump administration, up through new developments in the Biden administration, the CHIPS Act, conversation about AI diffusion, technology has become far more central to the way that governments are thinking about exercising their national power at a moment of contestation. And yet, at the same time, I think that geopolitical contestation has also created some interesting opportunities and developments when it comes to technological innovation. Certainly in the European theater, there is no doubt that the tragedy of the war that is going on in Ukraine right now has nonetheless created tremendous advancements and new ways of thinking about defense technology that will have an impact across the European theater, but more broadly and globally as well. The fact that countries are now thinking about technology alliances and partnerships, whether that is, as we heard here, ISAT trust between the United States and India, more broadly, biopharmaceutical alliances and partnerships, that has much more become a way that governments are doing business. But what does that mean? At a moment, of course, when we see global tariffs going up and ongoing trade war between the United States and China, are we at a moment in which technological innovation comes back on shore to national governments? And does that undo what I think has been a trend toward both friendshoring, but also when it comes to technology, multilateralism in the last few years? So we're going to turn to our experts here to ask some of these questions. And Ashley, I'm going to start with you because obviously what is going on with the United States is the question that is on everyone's mind. And certainly I think what that means for US technology partnerships. The US India Tech Partnership was central, I think, to the relationship over the last 4 years. What should we expect in terms of how this administration thinks about technology partnerships? And will you see where maybe the story of the last 4 years was folks like Micron, folks like Apple investing here in India, that what this administration will be looking for is folks like Tata, folks like Mahindra investing in the United States?
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Lindsay. I'm going to try and take a crack at that question, though I must confess that if I knew the answer to that, I could retire right away because I'd be the world's greatest stock picker. It's very hard to try and divine with precision what this administration will do. But I think there are 2 trends that are sort of competing for attention. One is a strong streak of techno-nationalism that exists in this administration that wants to preserve and protect US technological dominance and wants to bring back a variety of capabilities that it believes have been lost to the rest of the world back to the United States. On the other hand, I think there is also a recognition that there will be limits to how successfully and how completely this process can actually be brought to fruition. So there are two tendencies which are at odds with one another. How this will play out, I think, will really be determined by the mix of personalities within the policymaking space and the prominence of certain personalities vis-a-vis others. And the jury is still out on that one. But what does this mean specifically for India? I'm actually quite optimistic about our ability to sustain the technological partnership with India for two reasons. First, simply the logic of the market. India happens to have an enormously talented pool of manpower that corporate America simply cannot do without. And many of the things that we've seen happen in the last 10 years, the rise of global capability centers, the collaborations that have occurred between US business and Indian business, have really not been triggered so much by state action. They've been responses to the incentives provided by the marketplace. I don't see India's manpower advantages disappearing. I don't see the United States able to sharply increase the size of its manpower pool within the next 5 to 10 years, which takes us naturally to a partnership with India that will be sustaining. Second, the United States increasingly is thinking of geopolitical competition, and China is, of course, front and center in this competition. And even though our policies towards India and the rest of the world may be quite ragged in terms of how we respond to the China competition, India figures very prominently as a partner of the United States in that vision. And so I think at least on the US-India relationship, it is actually possible to be more optimistic than maybe the understanding the broader trends in US technology policy itself.
Great, thanks very much. Thorsten, I'm going to turn to you, where perhaps the current feeling in Europe is a little different than it seems here in Delhi. And just want to ask you your perspective, both as the transatlantic alliance is perhaps in a bit of a rougher moment. Do you see more potential for collaboration on the technology front between Europe and India? And how do you think our European friends will approach technology partnerships with this administration?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, Rudra and Shruti. This is a fantastic forum, and I'm glad to be part of it. And I think we can learn from the spirit in a sense, because Dr. Jaishankar talked about our predicament as Europeans, and I think we need to turn our predicament into Sambhavna, because we have no other choice, and get into action and rethinking things and rethinking collaboration and diversifying what we started to talk about. And of course, India is one obvious focus on this. And I think the thinking on this has started. Look at the coalition treaty in my country that has just been concluded, that talks about deepening the strategic partnership with India. And who would have thought a while ago that it talks about specifically deepening defense cooperation and clean energy and overall energy partnerships. So I think that's important. Last year we had a focus on India strategy paper. On the European Union, we talked about the College of Commissioners, and Hervé Delphin, the ambassador, is here, the visit. And I think we need to, there's good intentions and there's some things happening, or we need to fill it with life and excitement. The External Affairs Minister mentioned the Trade and Technology Council. I think we need to make sure that it's not just a box-ticking exercise. Nobody, I think, in the US and the EU administrations is really excited about the EU-US TTC when you actually go to it and conclude it, because I think we somehow have failed to make it exciting. I think the jury on the EU-India TTC is still out. There's so much cooperation potential in areas on clean tech, on bio and pharma, and lots of other areas. Defense we already talked about, and I think the proof will be to, first of all, do real mutual learning on how we deal with our dependencies on China and China's technology lead, and de-risking our supply chains, because I do think that's a predicament India and the European Union does share, and then do concrete initiatives. ISET, or which called Trust now, did this defense tech accelerator. Why don't we, we need to do similar things on the EU-India front, and I think then it can be, and I think then maybe the the external affairs minister will be even more excited about the prospect of the TTC. And I think you talked about the spirit. I think we will only be successful. Over breakfast, we talked about the Indian 1991 moment spirit. I think we need that in Europe for sure right now, because our business model, at least as Germany, I can say, in this competition of systems with Xi's authoritarian state capitalism and Trump's MAGA tech oligarchy capitalism, our traditional business model is broke. It doesn't work anymore. We need to totally rethink and reform also domestically. I do think that spirit we need in Europe. J.D. Vance wasn't even half wrong in his Paris speech on our attitude toward artificial intelligence, for example, in terms of slightly pivoting in that field. And I think you can even have that 1991 spirit reincarnated here in India, because things do take work, as the foreign affairs minister said, on rethinking nuclear regulation to actually enable a nuclear renaissance here in this country. And that's, I think, only one area, because we need to change both in order to conclude this trade agreement that we both want to conclude, but that we won't conclude if we don't do domestic reforms that actually sometimes also hurt.
Thanks so much, Thorsten. Nifert, I want to come to you next. Get some perspective from the private sector. One of the things that came out in Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to the United States was an agreement for the United States and India to work together on an artificial intelligence roadmap. I think something that both sides are quite excited about, but nonetheless, a lot of issues that will have to be worked through to make that real. So can you give me a little bit of perspective? What are some of, I think, the big questions or perhaps answers that the private sector will be looking for out of that roadmap to make AI collaboration between the US and India easier? And then as you look forward to trust, or this next generation of technology partnership between the US and India, there's certainly been momentum, but what are some of the key reforms, regulatory issues that need to be addressed here in Delhi, but also in the United States to make some of that vision more real?
Thank you very much. And, like all the guests here, I'm very honored to be here. Thanks, Rudra and Carnegie. Firstly, what is interesting is I work in a public-private organization. And having spent my 30 years of life in private sector, I now am part of the government, and I understand the challenges and opportunities in a very different way. So I can say that outside, I have many of my friends smiling at me. From outside, it was very easy to, oh, government is slow. Oh, they don't do this. Oh, I could have done this fast. When you come inside the government and you look at the cost of the alpha beta errors, it's huge. It's your country, it's humanity that's at stake, not my company. So I have a very different appreciation and understanding. And I can tell you, a DeepSeek moment can happen in any industry. What is a DeepSeek moment? We have recently started using words which identify with companies. You Google. So I'm saying there's going to be deep seeking many industries. And for that, I feel the only way things can happen is collaboration. And oftentimes our Prime Minister says, Abhi samay hai, sahi samay hai. Time is now and time is right. And I like to explain it in a different way. Time is right now because convergence of technology is happening. We are working on 1 nanometer compute. which is 1 by 10,000 of a hair. So compute has become cheap. Power is very important, and power, we are looking at renewable and generating more power, etc. So I really feel on top, the third vector that gets added is the geopolitics, and tariff is part of it. So I feel convergence of technology should happen, partnership should happen, and that's what AI is going to enable. 20% of the world data is in India. Our Prime Minister says there's no way India can be out of the picture when AI is being discussed. So I can start with a little bit of context and then I'll tell you what answer. So, there was a time, long time back in India when I was growing up, there were three important things, which was roti, kapda, makan, which is food, house, and clothes to wear. And now we believe the three critical requirements for any country, company is technology, power, and infrastructure. Technology like AI is going to make a difference, and they have many components, subcomponents, raw materials that will be required. So we will have to partner on all of those. The second thing is power. India is very hot on building half of its power from renewable. Today, we are looking at 40%. By 2030, we will have 350 gigawatts of solar, 500 gigawatts of renewable. I also want to tell you, countries like US, I will also add Europe, if you look at building a solar module, it costs United States and Europe pretty similar, like 25 cents per watt module. Let me tell you what China builds it with. China builds it with 15 cents per watt. And also let me tell you, they sell at 9 cents per watt, and that is what's called dumping. If an opportunity like this exists to enable generation of manufacturing of modules at the similar rate, why shouldn't India and US partner? Because there is a need of power. How will you run AI? How will you run all of the digitalization if there's no power? So I really truly feel that there are strengths that India has the ability for in terms of resources and scale, and there are strengths that US has in terms of capital and technology, and both of us have a democratic vision that we are working for. So in terms of AI, I think power is important. The second thing is the ability for compute. Compute has become very, very critical, and all of us have lived COVID. When I know in my previous company's experience that a $100,000 Mercedes was sitting because of lack of availability of $1 microcontroller. And similarly, if you're talking AI, you need the GPUs, you need the compute. And just to tell you, because I'm from inside of the government, I can tell you, for an average GPU, one GPU to run for 1 hour, India is 1/3 of the world because of the government support and subsidizing. So if we want to run data centers, we have to look at India as an opportunity. India has 2 to 3% of data centers, but 20% of the data. So for investment, data, I can tell you, I'm in Invest India. What we have enabled over the last 2 years when I have been there, 30% of foreign direct investment is coming in the energy space, which is one critical requirement for any technology. So I talked about power, I talked about compute, and we have to look at partnership between India and US to enable deep seeking many industries, because hardware is not the solution alone. Hardware plus software, which India has 5 million of, can be disrupting many industries. I was recently in Amsterdam working to bring ASML's investment into India. And ASML is saying, why do I need to go to India? I said, similar to building computational lithography. Computational lithography is AI and software. So I'm just saying 5 million software, 1 million engineering graduates each year. India has a lot to offer to partner with US to come up with a common vision that we both have as countries, which is global good, combined minds across oceans, and protecting the interests of humanity across generations. Lastly, is data protection and IP protection. I personally feel with so much IP leak happening, an ARM moment happened in China, but an ARM moment has never happened in India for people because I'm assuming there's Chatham House rules. ARM architecture, no? Oh, okay. Okay. So India, okay, India IP leak. I thought it was closed door. I assumed closed door. Okay. Okay, my assumption was closed door means Chatham House. Okay, so I'm not going to give you the details, but I can tell you any microprocessor architecture leak has not happened in India. So IP sharing infrastructure can enable a lot of innovation between India and US and data sharing. So Rudra and I have often talked about building a trusted corridor between India and US, literally a tunnel of trust based corridor where data, IP, information is shared, again, leveraging AI. And that I think is what our government is looking forward to discuss and enable. AI transforming many sectors and deep seeking many industries.
Thank you, Nifruti. I appreciate it. Samir, I'm going to come to you last, but certainly not least here. As someone who has been watching the US-India partnership for many years, certainly I think when you look at the joint statement that came out of the Prime Minister's visit, quite frankly, more continuity than change when you read that statement, which might be surprising to some in a moment in which it seems like the world is on fire and things are changing faster than we can keep track of. So I just want to push you a little bit and say that joint statement made it perhaps seem like much will be the same here. But what should we actually expect may change and need to change as the United States thinks about the partnership with India? And how do you think India is going to approach its technology partnership with the United States differently at a moment in which it's certainly perhaps not the same government in how it thinks about international partnerships than it did a few months ago?
No, I think, Lindsay, you're right. And first of all, let me congratulate Rudra for putting this together. Wonderful. Rudra, for actually building this global platform out of India at a time when these platforms are needed to actually serve partnerships and opportunities that abound. So thank you to Carnegie and you and the MEA for investing in this conversation. And thank you for not making it Chatham House, because under Chatham House rules, no one shares secrets. They always do it when the camera is on. Otherwise, there's no fun. So if you want innards of discussions to come out, turn on the camera. I always say that, spectacles are what people like today in policy and politics. It's really a different world. So 2 quick points. I think on the India-US, you're right. I am stunned by the consensus on India in the United States, because we don't have that even in India about India. So US has more confidence and congruence in its appreciation, assessment, and engagement with India than we have with ourselves. So well done to the US. But it's not going to be the same. It is certainly not going to be the same. I think there's going to be very clear departures from the past. Number one, the Trump transactionalism is going to demand performance from India. Biden was lazy in his implementation. Trump is going to be extractive in the implementation. You will have to see India do more to keep up with the expectations from the White House, which is not a bad thing for India, by the way, because we love being lazy ourselves, right? Because we've been there for 3,000 years, so we can wait for another 3,000, right? So we love that self-assessment. So I think a little bit of continuity and a little bit of transactionalism could just be that right mix for us to do more. And let me give you 2 particular ideas that were popping out for me when I was reading the joint statement, and especially on the defense tech side, right? One was, of course, the oblique reference to future fighters and the jets and the aviation space. But I think that's overstated. I was particularly interested in the undersea platforms. And I think that is where the future lies if we really want to ramp up our relationship. because till now, America has not parted with those crown jewels. And if they are willing to, and by the way, Trump, I think, is going to be more willing than anyone else, and could be fueling India's strategic capabilities, deterrence capabilities, maritime domain awareness capabilities, giving us some of those critical platforms, you could completely change the texture of trust that till now has been deployed more frequently than actually been visible in engagements, because we have still not seen some of America's most strategic technologies being available for India. We have seen market technologies being procured by through commercial deals. Let's be honest here. I think that could be this moment when we actually operationalize the civil nuclear agreement by sharing some of these crown jewels that America has still not shared, even with Australia, for example. AUKUS is the big departure, right? It's the first time the Americans are thinking about a nuclear submarine with Australia. And believe you me, AUKUS began with Australia, it is going to end with India, because Australia does not have the market capabilities to support a whole new line of production. So eventually, AUKUS 2.0 is really about India, and I hope that Trump is really about catalyzing that kind of transformation.
party to this thing. I don't think Biden's people were lazy. If you
Thank
look,
you.
if you if you look
Just
and
like to say.
Tarun is somewhere around, I think he was quite demanding, and the American semiconductor industry will certainly attest to him being demanding. And you ending up in tier 2 of the AI diffusion rule actually says that they have standards, and they don't they're not lazy in terms of determining their own kind of security requirements. I didn't have that impression from interacting with these folks.
A quick, no, the lazy was only in terms of their expectation from India, not from themselves. So you're right. I think the Biden folks did what they believed was useful for the US. I was talking about the bilateral relationship. They were gentler, kinder, and Lindsay, this is not a comment on the fantastic work you guys did. But on the Russia relationship, let me just